Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Don't forget to click subscribe if you want more of these videos. Okay, now back to the recap. Lucifer encounters a fleeing criminal and steals his clothes before getting the police to return him to Los Angeles. He asks Linda to remove his restored wings, but she refuses. Chloe brings him onto a new case, a dehydrated corpse found in the desert where Lucifer woke up while overseen by her new lieutenant, Marcus Pierce. The body turns out to be that of a wealthy man, and his close friend reveals that he paid kidnappers to prank the victim. While attempting to restore his own wings, Amenadiel discovers Lucifer's self-severed pair. Lucifer tries to show Chloe his true devil face, but is unable. To lure out the kidnappers, Pierce instructs Dan to get himself kidnapped, which Lucifer arranges. However, he makes himself the target at the last moment, suspecting the kidnappers to be behind his own abduction. He interrogates them and learns that the dead man was turned over to another kidnapper. The man reveals that he was hired by the Cinnamon, a mysterious crime boss, to abduct Lucifer. Lucifer, whose wings grew back after he cut them off again, initially suspects that God restored his wings as punishment for sending Charlotte to a void, but eventually comes to believe that it is something darker connected to Cinnamon. After failing to connect a recent murder to the Cinnamon, Lucifer is told by Chloe that he has to either bring her evidence that he exists or allow the case to die. Pierce assigns them a new case. A murdered comedian who accused his rival, Bobby Lowe, of stealing his jokes. Amenadiel asks Linda to help him destroy Lucifer's severed wings. While attending one of Bobby's shows, Lucifer storms the stage and accidentally shoots him with a gun hidden in a hand puppet. It turns out that Bobby did steal the jokes and wanted to be fired from the show. Pierce warns Lucifer that the Cinnamon is real and killed someone close to him during his previous posting in Chicago. Lucifer, Chloe and Dan run a sting operation, netting an old friend of Bobby's, who reveals that the dead man was working on a new set with Sheila, Bobby's warm-up act. They find and arrest her. Pierce makes an agreement with Lucifer to help find the Cinnamon, so long as he keeps Chloe out of it. Inspired by something Sheila said, Lucifer decides to focus not on his regrowing wings or the loss of his devil face, but on his skill as a granter of favors. Bored with her life, Maze decides to hunt a more challenging target. A serial killer named Ben Rivers, who has evaded every attempt at capture. Tracking him to Canada, she eventually finds a witness and blackmails him into revealing the location of Rivers' girlfriend. Lucifer and Chloe question Rivers' former attorney and learn that he is a master manipulator. Against Chloe's concerns that Maze might be in trouble, Lucifer sends her the bounty's address. Rivers then reveals that he used to work as a bounty hunter for Lieutenant Herrera, the cop who sent Maze to catch him, and the two form an unlikely bond. Dan arrives at Chloe's request, but Rivers escapes to avoid being returned to police custody. With Lucifer's help, Chloe proves Rivers to be innocent, allowing them to bring Herrera, the real murderer, to justice. Despite her feelings for him, Maze decides to leave Rivers behind and return home. Rivers warns her that Herrera was working for someone very powerful and that she is likely now in danger. A shadowy figure is then shown placing a file on Maze into a drawer filled with files on all the protagonists. When Amenadiel shares his insights with Lucifer, the latter suggests that Amenadiel needs to walk in his shoes in order to understand him. Marcus assigns Chloe a new case. The victim, a counselor who worked with troubled kids, is shown to have been murdered with a tool belonging to a missing resident. Lucifer calls in a favor, finds the resident, and brings him back to the station. He turns out to be innocent, despite Lucifer's insistence that juveniles are incapable of reform. To prove his point, he sets up a marijuana distribution ring with the other kids, inadvertently providing Chloe with a lead that uncovers the murder weapon. Amenadiel gets arrested after assaulting a pimp, but Dan bails him out. The two talk and Amenadiel realizes that Lucifer's excessive lifestyle just covers up how lonely he is. As Pierce and Chloe track the new murder suspect, Pierce is shot by the man while protecting Chloe. Lucifer, angered, tracks down the shooter and nearly kills him, but Amenadiel intervenes. Based on his experiences, Amenadiel concludes that his test is to have Lucifer's back. Lucifer rebukes him, enraged by the thought that his feelings for Chloe are responsible for what he has become. Simon Fisher, a chemist at a pudding company, is found dead in one of his vats, and the company's owner turns out to be represented by Charlotte Richards, for whom Lucifer still has conflicting feelings. He and Chloe learn that the dead man wanted to sell his secret formula to a rival company and identify a fixer who had been spying on him. An encounter with Dan inspires Charlotte to visit Lucifer for help filling in her missing memories, however, she mistakenly believes that they were romantically involved. After Lucifer clears things up, he discovers that she was trapped in hell while his mother inhabited her body. He encourages her to confess her sins, which include withholding crucial evidence from Chloe. Using it, Ella determines that the pudding's ingredients can cause kidney failure and that Simon committed suicide to expose the company's wrongdoing. Overwhelmed with guilt, Charlotte has a breakdown and holds the owner, fixer, and rival owner hostage to force them to reveal who killed Simon. Lucifer talks her down, and Chloe uses a recording he made to charge them with endangering public health. Lucifer meets Charlotte and admits that she is not to blame for his mother's actions. The two agree to start a professional relationship. At Chloe's birthday celebration, Lucifer receives word that Candy, his fake wife, has disappeared. Without telling Chloe, he and Ella travel to Las Vegas, where they find a woman dressed as Candy murdered in her apartment. Lucifer suspects that a loan shark who once tried to seize Candy's father's club was responsible, but he turns up dead as well. While investigating the loan shark's wife, a pit boss at a nearby casino, Ella is caught counting cards at blackjack, and she and Lucifer are thrown out. Candy, who had been posing as a waitress while following the same lead, admits that the dead woman was a friend of hers. Lucifer and Ella set a trap at the club and discover that Jed, the bartender, was the killer. Ella subdues him and they return home. Entering his apartment, Lucifer discovers that Chloe, Dan, and Linda threw a party and attempted unsuccessfully to break into his safe. After admitting to Chloe that he was wrong not to tell her why he was leaving, he opens the safe and presents her with a gift. A necklace made from the bullet she shot him with when they first started working together. After waking up from a coma, Linda's estranged husband Reese Getty, an investigative reporter, discovers her affair with Lucifer. Enraged, he decides to write an expose to ruin his reputation. Lucifer and Chloe investigate a serial killer, and Linda serves Reese with divorce papers. Lucifer confronts Reese and persuades him to drop his investigation. Just as Reese accepts that Lucifer is right, he witnesses him use his devil face. A year later, a nearly deranged Reese decides to kill Lucifer, shooting him in the middle of a therapy session. Linda explains that she knows Lucifer's true nature and considers him her friend, but Reese storms out. He then tracks down the killer and gets him to poison Lucifer, but an innocent woman is killed instead. Reese blames Lucifer for his actions. Lucifer counters that humans like Reese are responsible for damning themselves. Reese tries to make up with Linda, but she sees he is trying to manipulate her and has gone too far in what he has done. He goes to his office to turn himself in, where he gets the poison he deserves from the killer, who is arrested. Reese then wakes up at the beginning of the episode, which we see as his time loop in hell. Lucifer grows concerned when Amenadiel calls him boring and sets out to prove him wrong. A woman named Kim Jones is murdered, and Chloe traces the last call she made to Top Meat, a popular dating app. Chloe attends the company's mixer and adopts Lucifer's mannerisms to blend in. She and Dan locate a man who reveals that Kim was about to receive a large sum of money. It turns out that Kim founded Top Meat and wanted to make it more accessible, and that Mac, whom she chose as CEO, killed her to preserve the app's exclusivity. While planning her ex-husband's funeral, Linda has an existential crisis and reveals that Reese's passing has made her fear death. Amenadiel manages to calm her by explaining that he once had a similar crisis, thus fixing their friendship. Wanting to avoid damnation, Charlotte lies to Ella about wanting to study forensics, giving her an excuse to follow the latter around. When Ella points out that being good means not just words, but actions, Charlotte decides to leave her practice and join the district attorney's office. Lucifer briefly contemplates whether being boring is for him, before deciding it is not. Pierce rejects Chloe's request for a personal day. Joey Pileggi, who asked Lucifer for a favor months before, winds up murdered. Lucifer reveals the favor was getting him work as a mob courier. Maze becomes uneasy about Linda and Amenadiel growing closer. Charlotte, as a prosecutor, joins Chloe and Lucifer as they question Frankie Ferrante, the mobster who mentored Joey, and learn that his death was not mob-related. Another body turns up, which Lucifer recognizes as another client. Ella identifies the killer as the Cinnamon, who lures Lucifer into an abandoned building and traps him inside. With Charlotte's help, Chloe manipulates Frankie into going after the Cinnamon, but Charlotte feels hurt that Chloe didn't tell her the plan. Maze finds Lucifer and forces him to acknowledge her feelings before freeing him. Pierce tells Chloe that he plans to get revenge against the Cinnamon for murdering his brother. The Cinnamon ambushes Frankie, but Chloe and Pierce manage to capture him. Maze asks Linda to stop seeing Amenadiel. Dan comforts Charlotte and tells her being good takes time and commitment. Lucifer tries using his powers on the Cinnamon, but the latter gouges his own eyes out before he can do so. The Cinnamon claims that a woman will soon be drowned in a spot only he knows. Chloe tracks a possible lead, which takes them to the woman's car and a planted bomb. Realizing the only option, Chloe has Ella help her smuggle the Cinnamon out. Trixie encourages Charlotte to be a better mother. Pierce and Chloe manage to save the woman, but Lucifer and the Cinnamon vanish. The woman apparently owed the Cinnamon a debt and set up her own kidnapping. The Cinnamon wakes up in Lucifer's private estate, where Maze proceeds to torture him until he is close to death. Despite a celestial rule dictating that angels may not take human lives, Lucifer concludes that killing him is the only solution. Maze abandons him in disgust. Lucifer realizes that the Cinnamon's true desire is to die by his hand. Pierce arrives with Chloe and fatally shoots the Cinnamon. Trixie gets Charlotte to go on a date with Dan. After deducing that the Cinnamon was working for someone more powerful, Lucifer calls Pierce to Lux. It is revealed that Pierce is in fact the immortal Cain, the world's first murderer who was cursed to wander the earth forever. In 2011, Lucifer leaves Hell for Los Angeles. His brother Amenadiel demands that he return to Hell, but Lucifer talks him into delaying their departure. Amenadiel is shot and his necklace is stolen. Knowing the danger of exposing humans to divinity, he persuades Lucifer to help him find it in return for a favor. Meanwhile, beat cop Chloe Decker and her husband, Dan Espinosa, investigate the murder of MMA fighter Aiden Scott. Lucifer abducts the promoter who tried to fix Aiden's last fight, summoning his demon torturer Mazikeen to interrogate him. Chloe visits the promoter's lawyer, Charlotte Richards, and pressures her into setting up a sting operation with her client. Lucifer sets up a fight with Amenadiel to show that they are the same. Amenadiel dominates the fight, but allows Lucifer to win by submission to prove that, unlike Lucifer, he can control his pride. The sting nets Aiden's mentor Gil, but Lucifer and Amenadiel snatch him up and force him to confess to murder and theft before leaving him to be arrested. Lucifer uses his favor to get Amenadiel to leave him on Earth. He also has Maze cut off his wings. Lucifer accuses Pierce of working for God, but he denies it. A surfer's body is found on a private beach. Chloe, furious with Lucifer for going behind her back in the previous episode, blocks him from the investigation. Charlotte chastises Pierce for yelling at Ella, and Amenadiel learns, falsely, that he has contracted chlamydia. Linda advises Lucifer to pay more attention to Chloe's needs, and Dan tells him to be helpful without getting in her way. Chloe suspects that a surfer gang may have been involved in the murder, sending Dan to go undercover and work their leader, Wildchild. After learning that Pierce intends to skip town, Lucifer discovers that he wishes to die and had previously put himself and Chloe in danger, hoping to be killed after learning that Lucifer is vulnerable around Chloe. Wildchild tells Dan that the gang had nothing to do with the murder, and Chloe deduces that the owners of the beach were framing them. Linda tells Amenadiel that she is not comfortable dating him due to Maze's objections, but they kiss and Maze sees them. Lucifer makes a deal with Pierce to end his life. Pierce loses faith in Lucifer's lack of progress. Maze theorizes that he must have an exploitable weakness. Murdered woman June Lee turns out to be a criminal named Sandra Jiang, whose death is found to be connected to her role cooking ecstasy. Lucifer collects the mobster who once employed Sandra. He agrees to cooperate with the investigation in return for Sandra's recipe. To prove that Sandra was selling her product independently, Chloe decides to have Lucifer and Pierce pose as a married couple in order to infiltrate her neighborhood. Dan and Charlotte go on their first date, but Maze crashes it due to her attraction to Charlotte. The cops learn that a watchdog who has been terrorizing the neighborhood is connected to Sandra's death. Lucifer lures him out, but he turns out to be innocent. His wife is revealed to be the killer, having mistakenly believed Sandra to be having an affair with her husband. Charlotte decides that she needs some time away from relationships in order to refocus. Pierce notes that, as much as Lucifer wants to help him, he is more interested in using him to get revenge on his father. Lucifer, realizing that he understands nothing about Cain's mark, decides to ask Amenadiel for help, but he refuses. Ella's older brother, Jay Lopez, disappears after a man he was meeting is murdered. Chloe asks Ella to recuse herself from the investigation, but she and Maze go off to find him anyway. Charlotte is turned down by Linda when she asks for a consultation, as she still fears her. The victim is tied to a jewelry store heist, and Lucifer and Chloe check with the owner, who reveals that the robbery was actually insurance fraud. Pierce tracks down Amenadiel, who he knows gave him the mark, and assaults him in anger. Chloe and Dan confirm that Jay was, in fact, hired to clean the stolen diamonds. Lucifer has a nightmare about Chloe dying. On his quest to help Pierce, Lucifer uses murdered author Kathleen Pike's latest work to overcome his lack of ideas. Linda and Amenadiel continue their romance in secret, unaware that Maze already knows. Chloe learns that the characters in Kathleen's books are based on people from her high school days. Lucifer agrees to go undercover with her at an upcoming reunion to find the killer. Maze intentionally sets up Linda and Amenadiel on blind dates with herself and Todd, the man Lucifer impersonates at the reunion, as revenge for their deception. Maze angrily storms out after Linda defends her actions. Chloe and Lucifer discover that all of the party attendees have an alibi except for Todd, who explains that Kathleen had a different ending for her book from what her editor wanted, and Chloe realizes he is not the killer and uses that information to set a trap for the real one. Lucifer has a breakdown when he realizes that Kathleen's work was destroyed and leaves. Linda breaks up with Amenadiel for Maze's sake. Lucifer throws Chloe the prom she never had and also has an epiphany thanks to her. To break Pierce's curse, he has to prevent the circumstances that caused it. To break Pierce's curse, Lucifer proposes resurrecting Abel from hell. However, the plan goes awry when Abel is revived in the body of Brie Garland, the assistant to B-movie producer Alexa Lee, whose office was recently blown up by a bomb. Based on information provided by Maze, Lucifer and Pierce track Abel to a pool party. Amenadiel arrives and tries to persuade Abel to commit suicide by claiming he is still in hell. Chloe's investigation uncovers links between Alexa's film studio and a Bolivian drug cartel, and she realizes that Brie, who had been aware of her employer's crimes, was trying to expose her. Abel encounters Pierce and shoots him, but he is unharmed. Chloe takes Brie and Lucifer to Alexa's office for evidence, where they narrowly manage to defuse another bomb. Using a recovered fingerprint, Chloe has Alexa arrested for money laundering. Charlotte makes progress in therapy with Linda, while Amenadiel, after fighting with Maze, calls her childish for ruining his chance at romance. Abel, having somewhat reconciled with his brother, asks for some space to figure himself out. Lucifer, concerned about Chloe's safety, informs Pierce that he is ending their partnership, and Abel is killed by an ambulance. Pierce loses faith in Lucifer's lack of progress. Maze theorizes that he must have an exploitable weakness. Murdered woman June Lee turns out to be a criminal named Sandra Jiang, whose death is found to be connected to her role cooking ecstasy. Lucifer collects the mobster who once employed Sandra. He agrees to cooperate with the investigation in return for Sandra's recipe. To prove that Sandra was selling her product independently, Chloe decides to have Lucifer and Pierce pose as a married couple in order to infiltrate her neighborhood. Dan and Charlotte go on their first date, but Maze crashes it due to her attraction to Charlotte. The cops learn that a watchdog who has been terrorizing the neighborhood is connected to Sandra's death. Lucifer lures him out, but he turns out to be innocent. His wife is revealed to be the killer, having mistakenly believed Sandra to be having an affair with her husband. Charlotte decides that she needs some time away from relationships in order to refocus. Pierce notes that, as much as Lucifer wants to help him, he is more interested in using him to get revenge on his father. Lucifer, realizing that he understands nothing about Cain's mark, decides to ask Amenadiel for help, but he refuses. Ella's older brother, Jay Lopez, disappears after a man he was meeting is murdered. Chloe asks Ella to recuse herself from the investigation, but she and Maze go off to find him anyway. Charlotte is turned down by Linda when she asks for a consultation, as she still fears her. The victim is tied to a jewelry store heist, and Lucifer and Chloe check with the owner, who reveals that the robbery was actually insurance fraud. Pierce tracks down Amenadiel, who he knows gave him the mark, and assaults him in anger. Chloe and Dan confirm that Jay was, in fact, hired to clean the stolen diamonds. Lucifer has a nightmare about Chloe dying. On his quest to help Pierce, Lucifer uses murdered author Kathleen Pike's latest work to overcome his lack of ideas. Linda and Amenadiel continue their romance in secret, unaware that Maze already knows. Chloe learns that the characters in Kathleen's books are based on people from her high school days. Lucifer agrees to go undercover with her at an upcoming reunion to find the killer. Maze intentionally sets up Linda and Amenadiel on blind dates with herself and Todd, the man Lucifer impersonates at the reunion, as revenge for their deception. Maze angrily storms out after Linda defends her actions. Chloe and Lucifer discover that all of the party attendees have an alibi except for Todd, who explains that Kathleen had a different ending for her book from what her editor wanted, and Chloe realizes he is not the killer and uses that information to set a trap for the real one. Lucifer has a breakdown when he realizes that Kathleen's work was destroyed and leaves. Linda breaks up with Amenadiel for Maze's sake. Lucifer throws Chloe the prom she never had and also has an epiphany thanks to her. To break Pierce's curse, he has to prevent the circumstances that caused it. To break Pierce's curse, Lucifer proposes resurrecting Abel from hell. However, the plan goes awry when Abel is revived in the body of Brie Garland, the assistant to B-movie producer Alexa Lee, whose office was recently blown up by a bomb. Based on information provided by Maze, Lucifer and Pierce track Abel to a pool party. Amenadiel arrives and tries to persuade Abel to commit suicide by claiming he is still in hell. Chloe's investigation uncovers links between Alexa's film studio and a Bolivian drug cartel, and she realizes that Brie, who had been aware of her employer's crimes, was trying to expose her. Abel encounters Pierce and shoots him, but he is unharmed. Chloe takes Brie and Lucifer to Alexa's office for evidence, where they narrowly manage to defuse another bomb. Using a recovered fingerprint, Chloe has Alexa arrested for money laundering. Charlotte makes progress in therapy with Linda, while Amenadiel, after fighting with Maze, calls her childish for ruining his chance at romance. Abel, having somewhat reconciled with his brother, asks for some space to figure himself out. Lucifer, concerned about Chloe's safety, informs Pierce that he is ending their partnership, and Abel is killed by an ambulance. Pop singer Ixara's life is threatened when one of her backup dancers, wearing a mask and the same outfit as Ixara, gets killed by a high-powered firework. Chloe investigates without much help from Lucifer, who is still worried about putting Chloe in danger and trying to avoid her, but does offer to sequester Ixara at Lux until the killer is found. Suspicion falls on a crazed fan, who is soon found dead himself, then to Ixara's manager, before evidence ultimately leads Chloe to Ixara's former high school friend and current tour manager, Cease. Elsewhere, Pierce is dejected over Lucifer backing off on helping him die and the fact that Abel could not kill him either. Ella convinces Dan to talk to him, which does no good, but a conversation with Amenadiel seems to help. Pierce once again believes that Chloe is the key and uses Ixara concert tickets Chloe received as a thank you to ask her out on a date, which she tells Lucifer. Meanwhile, Linda tries to reconcile her friendship with Maze, even getting Charlotte to mediate their dispute, but Maze refuses. In 1958, Pierce, an LAPD detective, is assigned to investigate a serial murderer known as the Broken Hearts Killer. In the present, 2 new victims are found that match the killer's MO. Lucifer tries to get between what he suspects is a growing romance between Chloe and Pierce. Dan tells a drunken Maze to pull herself together for Chloe's sake. More victims turn up, validating Pierce's belief that a copycat is responsible. Amenadiel runs into Charlotte and Linda advises him to keep his distance. Pierce visits the granddaughter of his partner from 1958, getting back his files on the case. Maze and Dan argue and Maze ends up insulting Trixie, unaware that she is behind her. Using a radio call-in show to set up a sting, Chloe and Pierce pose as a cheating couple and lure out the killer, who turns out to be a man who found the original killer's journals and became obsessed with them. Charlotte persuades Amenadiel to reveal the truth to her. Pierce decides to pursue a relationship with Chloe, with which Lucifer has, for the time being, come to terms. Maze asks Lucifer to send her back to hell, but he refuses, believing it will lead to repercussions for Chloe, and suggests that she needs to blow off some steam. Linda warns Charlotte not to see Amenadiel again. Security footage of a new murder seems to implicate Maze as the killer, and Chloe learns that the victim was one of her bounties. Maze subsequently turns herself in, claiming guilt, and even hands over the murder weapon. However, when Chloe presses her, it becomes clear that Maze only wants to take the fall. Charlotte forces Lucifer to tell her about his mother. Maze escapes custody, and Chloe determines that someone is framing her. Pierce becomes increasingly jealous of the special relationship between Lucifer and Chloe. A conversation with a former bounty leads them to a wealthy winery owner who blames Maze for getting her son killed. Chloe persuades Maze to spare the owner's life. Instead, she stabs her in the foot. Lucifer, prompted by Amenadiel, reveals his true self to Charlotte. When Lucifer tries to persuade her to stay, Maze, angry that he refuses to consider her feelings, prepares to leave town. However, Pierce stops her and promises to help her if she helps him. A news story surfaces of a guardian angel rescuing a victim in San Bernardino, leading Lucifer to wonder whether he could be responsible. Pierce's relationship with Chloe is strained by her refusal to let him meet Trixie. Linda suggests that Lucifer may not be aware of his actions because he is unconsciously trying to distract himself. Both he and Amenadiel suspect that God is responsible. Chloe finds a video of a fight involving the victim, which leads them to an actor who was hired to keep him from breaking his addiction to heroin. Lucifer's refusal to sleep interferes with his work. Lucifer forces the murderer to confess, but realizes his situation is similar and believes that Pierce is behind the guardian angel plan to keep him away from Chloe. Maze reveals that she's the guardian angel. Pierce wants Chloe to say "I love you" in hopes of removing the mark. Chloe is about to tell him she loves him, but he stops her, changing his mind and dumps Chloe, breaking her heart in the process. Furious, Lucifer attacks Pierce. Pierce admits he has had a change of heart and could not hurt Chloe after all. He gives up and does not fight, allowing Lucifer to hurt him, but the latter realizes the mark has vanished, rendering Pierce mortal.